Okay, so I'm not going to talk about John almost at all, except that he is just one of a long list of Christians who gave his life for the truth. He was beheaded for telling the truth to the Roman rulers. So think of this. So you're reading the scriptures and they're talking about this great joy that has come into their life and they've been touched and God is forgiving their sins and they're blown away by it and they're being touched by power from the Holy Spirit and they're walking around with this, while Jesus is around, they're walking around with this guy who they eventually realize is God incarnate. And these are the most incredible times you could ever live in. Think of that. I mean, everyone, if you had a time machine, where would you go? No question where I'm going. And I'd probably get there and be like, dude, get out of here. Jesus would look at me and go, get out of here, man. You're not supposed to be here. But it would still be worth it. I'd be like, all right, but I just had to. So this is going on. The neatest stuff ever. Blowing their minds. And you read about it and you think, man, it must have been incredible to live in the time of Jesus. Okay, and yeah, it was. And um, they were completely subjugated, the Jewish peoples, and under Roman rule. And the Jews had an exception. They did not have to uh, sacrifice animals and things to the Roman gods in order to stay in good terms with Rome. But as soon as the Christians became Christians instead of Jews, just as soon as they realized it was a new religion, Rome started to murder them and kill them for being Christian, burning them alive, crucifying them, and killing them. So you're reading these stories about the most incredible times. They're telling you the joy that has come into their hearts. They're writing about it to us. Every single one of the disciples, save John, was murdered, burnt alive, or crucified for being Christian. Think about that. Um, and it's primarily because they wouldn't sacrifice animals to false gods in the name of Rome. It was really to keep Rome winning militarily and successful as an empire. They did sacrifices all the time, and the whole entire community, the whole entire populace had to sacrifice animals and things to the Roman gods to ensure their success. And they wouldn't do it. And because they wouldn't do it, they became persecuted. Um, St. Stephen was the first Christian martyr. He was stoned to death for it. He was stoned to death. Actually, he was stoned to death for denouncing Jewish authority. So this is why. Well, this is when they're starting to realize they're not Jewish anymore. They were pretty sure they were just Jewish, and all the Jewish people would accept Christ, and then they would just still be Jewish. They were still doing Jewish rituals. They were still doing Jewish practices. Then, like, it just became clear, though, eventually, oh my gosh, they're not going to join, and this is a new religion. So Saint Stephen denounces Jewish rulers, and they stone him to death. Peter and Paul were martyred in 66 A.D. Paul was beheaded. Peter was crucified. He said he wasn't worthy of being crucified, so he begged them to crucify him upside down. And so they did. They crucified him upside down. That's how Peter went out. Andrew, crucified in Russia, well, what's now known as Russia. So they went out to spread the message, right? They drew lots about who had to go where, and they just went to bring the message of Christ to the world. This is what they did. They gave up their homes, they gave up their security, they gave up their social security, their 401k. They gave it all up, all of it. They gave it all up and just went out into the wild, okay, for Christ, to get this message spread. Thomas was speared to death in India by 4 soldiers sharing Christ in India. He was murdered for it. Philip was he converted the Roman ruler in Africa. That's a continent, and that's an inside joke with somebody. Uh, he converted the Roman ruler's wife, and when her husband found out, dead, dead. So he's there sharing Christ, murdered, dead. Matthew, uh, stabbed to death in Ethiopia, sharing Christ. Okay, that's how he died. James was in Syria, stoned and clubbed to death for sharing Christ. Simon was in Persia, killed for not being willing to sacrifice animals to the sun gods. Killed. Matthias, that's who replaced Judas, burned to death. I guess Judas got a good deal. Of all of them, John, my favorite, he lived. He lived to a ripe old age. He was exiled to an island, had to live on this island called Patmos. He was exiled. That's where he wrote Revelations. We don't know why he wasn't murdered. We do know that he took care of Mother Mary until her Assumption. So it's John who took Mary into his home, took care of her until her Assumption into heaven. Okay. So the triumph, the joy of the Gospels, everything you're reading happened in those times. In those kinds of times, those kinds of perilous, dangerous times. And the Jewish temple, like 50 AD, don't quote me on those numbers, you know how I am with that, retentive memory. Around 50 AD, the Romans sacked the Jewish temple. They lost their religion and their place. They lost everything. Okay. Okay. So back in time, I'm living in my second home. And my wife's smart in some ways. One thing she did was when she was 19, she bought a house. So she bought a house for $19,000. Yeah. You're thinking, what? Yeah, that's right. $19,000. She worked as a housekeeper at Snowbird. She bought a house on that job. Okay. So then I met her. She had a house. So when we owned it, obviously $19,000. So when we sold it, I think we sold it for $136,000. So then we bought this other house because we knew Cass was coming, but we didn't really know, but we just knew. So then we needed a place that wasn't a ghetto and didn't have shootings and gang shootings going on. So we moved out of that neighborhood. Got a second place. We paid it off. But here's the thing. So we paid off this house. And I took security in that. I remember feeling, okay, everything's okay now. It's safe. My home is paid off. So I didn't mean to take security in it, but I did. I took security in it. It felt safe to have it paid off. So then the Holy Spirit, this all just happened. I'm summing it up, but I began to see that the security I was taking in having a home paid off was polluting my soul. I could see it. I could feel it in my heart. There was a false security. It was hurting my soul. It had come between God and I, because that's where I was getting my security instead of God. So it became clear I had to let go of this false security. So I did. I just started to divorce myself from it. It's easy. Every time you catch yourself going, man, I'm glad I got the house paid off. You say, Please let me die to this. Please let me stop thinking this way. And in no time at all, I became very aware as I let go of that false security of the dullness of heart and the hardness of heart that security had produced in me. And as I let it go, a brighter, new, more clear way to God was opened to me. This was my experience. Um, I didn't put a big loan on my house or something, and I didn't give it away either. I just stopped taking security in it, and that changed. That's when I felt the lie, the dullness of spirituality leave when I let it go and began to grow. I think recently after that is when I had my first experience with the light again after the night, coming back into the blinding light. So, okay. Okay. And then I just thought I'd share this one. So the other night, I came out of meditation. I must have been pretty deep, didn't know where I was. And I came out and I didn't come out enough to be fully in the room. So I became conscious, but I was still halfway down in, but I'm conscious. So I'm in a black void. And there's just this energy rushing through me. And it's chaotic and weird. So it's pulling me, it feels like it's pulling my body apart in all these weird directions. And I'm going like, like I don't want my body to be pulling apart. So, but I could tell that it was God pulling my body apart. So I let go, and it seemed right and good that I should just let it sort of just take me. So it pulled me in every direction, and then it ended. So I don't know what I would call that. For the class, I thought I'd call it body security, but I had to let go of this sense of body security. I had to let them just tear me, and it's an attachment. It's an attachment to something. See, it's all idolatry. It, God doesn't want to tear your body apart, but you shouldn't care, really. Nothing matters, right? It's God that matters. Everything else that we put before that and put our security in is a false God. That's the way it is. So, okay, now what the heck am I talking about? Well, I'm working with a lot of people, and a lot and the, there's there is a lot of uncertainty in the world right now. There's a lot of uncertainty in the world. Things you used to be able to take for granted are maybe not to be taken for granted. The whole way our country works could potentially fall apart. We're so divided in a way that is, all my friends who are still alive, no matter how old they are, say we have never, ever been. All my friends that went through the 60s say that it was nothing like this. It, it, my one friend, Tom, put it this way. He said, in the 60s, we agreed on what the problem was, but we disagreed on what the solution was. He said, we don't even agree on what the problem is now. We're living in different worlds. So because of this, because we're so divided, and because people are just so ridiculously selfish and childish, just that, just we become dead men. Dead men. No wisdom. No depth. Mockers and jeerers. And taking pleasure out of suffering. We have lost our way deeply. So, okay, so then that puts people in. What I'm trying to say is, I'm seeing people break in the wrong ways with this. I'm seeing people break the wrong way. So, Christianity is one of being broken. It's a path of being broken, right? Jesus says the stone the builders overlooked, and he who falls on it will be broken to pieces, and he who upon whom it falls will be crushed into powder. Well, that's Christ. You want to be broken to pieces. You want to be crushed into powder. If you the rebirth, the rebirth, the illuminative human, right? The unitive human, The human that is walking in union with God, that human has to die to be born. Yes, that man or that woman has to die to be reborn, and it has to happen again and again. And and life tends to stretch us and pull us so that it will happen. You get married, hardest thing you ever did. You get divorced, hardest thing you ever did. You get a new job, you get a degree, and you get a job. You're challenged all the time. Life is always doing it, but it's supposed to be doing it because it's all supposed to be taking apart the lie so it can be what's true. That's all it's for. So okay, I'm seeing people instead of letting. Okay, so here's what I'm trying to say. Yes, yes, it's true. It's possible that your security that you've counted on from this country is not going to be there. That's true. That's true. Um, at some point, you have to get over that and treat it like I paid off my house and now everything's okay. It's all okay now, and my house is paid off. I'm okay. And if I just get it, if I can just keep it now. So think about this. Yeah, the security we've counted on that we thought would be there, that isn't even really unreasonable to hope would be there, may not be there. That's true. It's like there's the stages of grief. I thought I'd mention that. I don't know them, but I know everyone here will know them. Um, you might have to go through the stages of grief on that, right? Get out of denial and get into acceptance. Don't be angry forever. You can be angry, but you can't stay angry. It bothers me that people would rather have chaos and disorder rather than a good, quiet life. I think they're insane. I think they're insatiably insane to want this. But I can't hate them. I could be mad for a minute. How long can I be mad for before it's toxic to me, right? And you look at the disciples, you look at the early Christians, they're getting killed for their faith. It's the best of times, the worst of times. They're reaching union with God, working miracles. The greatest gift to have ever been brought to humanity happens at a time when there is no security at all. None for them. Less for them than for us. Almost certainly. We don't know what's going to happen in this country. It could be really, really bad, or it could not be. That the uncertainty bugs people, I think. But you got to let it break you in the right way, right? You got to let it break you in the right way. You can't sink into depression, morbid fear. That's not it. That's breaking the wrong way. Um, I've seen people. This really happened to me directly. I get lucky a lot. I meet people that represent many different things. I get really lucky to meet people, and it seems like I figure out things because of it. I just have a weird way of finding the right stuff. I think it's a lucky. It's not a skill, but it's kind of a gift. I just stumble into the right stuff. It seems like I don't. It's weird. Um, I'm being taught, I think, but I'm also seeing people with a forced optimism. Um, it's pathological. They 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 just won't entertain that there could be anything wrong. That's how they're the specter that to deal with the fact that their security is under threat. They just say no, it isn't. It's not under threat. Nothing's happening. I don't care, but I if you're on the way to union with God, that's not going to work. Like they can do it, but you can't because you can't have illusions. You have to live in truth. Uh, I'm not saying you have to think what I think about what's going to happen, but you have to be honest about what you think. You can't be in dissonance with yourself. It doesn't work. Um, Another one I've seen that's really common the idolatry of certainty. People who decide they know exactly what's going to happen, they know exactly what's happening, they know why it's happening, they know who's doing it, they know why they're doing it. This is the idolatry of certainty, right? It's a way to be safe by understanding everything. But since you don't understand everything, you have to make it all up. I know one guy who's kind of homeless, lives in his van, who has the idolatry of certainty, and I have a very close friend who has a home and a secure life, a good, quiet life, who is living in the idolatry of certainty. They know exactly what's happening and whose fault it is. They know everything about it, but they don't. They're just human like me. They might be smarter, they might see a little more, but they just see what their lot is to see, and it's not everything. There's a lot more examples, but I wanted just for you guys and then also people I'm working with online, like just it's do inventory. Just do inventory. What are you afraid of? You know, what are you afraid of? And whatever that thing is you're afraid of, burn it in your heart and mind. Accept it. You can't live forever in shock over what's happening. It's not healthy. That's not the way. You can't be permanently traumatized over it. What are you afraid of? Um, I've known a few people I think reached the fullness of enlightenment. The one Christian teacher I don't talk about much, the one I talk about the least, who I think was enlightened when I met him. The more I think about him, and the further I am, the more I realize, by Hindu standards at least, he's all the way awake when I met him. Just already awake. Uh, and one guy that I know that I think is pretty enlightened, he was thinking he might lose his job and become homeless. And he said, well, I could meditate if I was homeless. So he said, so I don't care. I don't care. And see the difference? You see how someone could live their whole life in fear of that? When the answer is so easy? So easy? I already have like my seating system set up for if I'm homeless, how I'll meditate deeply on concrete. Like I've already thought about like if it came to homelessness, how would I set it up? Where would I get, meditation out of the sun? Like I've already got it kind of figured out what I would do so my prayer life would stay super sharp. See that now then there's no fear of being homeless. You figured out what you would do. See how like someone could spend their whole life in fear of that when the answer is so simple, just let it go and say, okay, then so what? Then so what? I mean, it's not something you want to happen, but what if it does? Then so what? Those attachments are things we lean on instead of God. That's the problem. Those kinds of things, our identity. I don't know that I've met a single professional yet who is not very sick in their identification with their profession. It's easier if you're just a bum. You don't want to identify with your job so much. It's a degradation of you. No problem. You're not so hooked up to your job. But if you've done something and made something of yourself, you want to be called this title and you want people to know it's what you do. That keeps you from union. That's death. Who cares? Um, I was in this place, I'm not going to say where, and I was purchasing something, and I turned around, and behind me was this couple. The way the priest would describe them, who have all the fruits of the world. They're tall, beautiful, wealthy, intelligent, highly successful. I turned around. I look how I look. They look how they look. Um, I dress how I dress. They dress how they dress. The guy, his face was somewhat contorted in judgment and pity for me, a little bit of disgust, I think. And I felt so sorry for him. I just felt so sorry for him. I didn't. It wasn't a mean. Oh, I feel sorry for you. I just felt sorry for him because that man lives in hell. He is in hell, and he's always in hell. But you got to give up all this stuff that you're living for people, you know. And it's. I knew a guy. I knew a guy that was a homeless bum, and he looked down on every single person that walked by. It's not like you have to be. It's not like you see what I'm trying to say. Wherever your station in life is, you could be looking down on everyone from it. It's fantastic. It's just, you know, I know plenty of people that are mostly homeless who look down on anyone that has a home. Those idiots, those fools, those losers who bought the system. Like you see what I mean? Like, and then everyone's doing it. That's that's idolatry. That's all idolatry. Okay, so the country is in disarray. People are very divided. Seem to not be able to even reach one another. It does seem to me that there's a big problem. It's if that was a marriage, I'd be very worried about that marriage. You know, it'd be all but dissolved. Frankly, might stay out of convenience or necessity, but that the marriage is dead. Uh, so what? Like mourn it, but do it consciously. Do some inventory. The young men I raised, they were raised in a world where every politician they ever knew lied to them profoundly. So they don't care. They're just not particularly rocked by what we're losing because to their perspective there wasn't much to lose. So then the older people I know, it's like, well, we I remember some times in the 80s, man, where it was just fun. It just seemed like nothing but promise. You know, I mean, it was just the music. Everyone was having so much fun, and it just was like great. And all those 80s shows about kids going out in the woods and having an adventure. And man, I grew up in that. That was fun. There does seem to be a loss to me, you know, but get over that loss. Cry and move on, you know, cry and move on. Identify what it is that's being taken from you and give it up on purpose so we could be free. Free to, you know, free for Pentecost. Free for Pentecost. Free for Pentecost. It, And also, don't be the one in the relationship that needs comforting. Be the one that's bringing comfort in the world. That's your job. Get to it. It's your job to bring light to them and comfort to them. Find your comfort in Christ and share it. Be a bringer of light. That is your job in this time. If things just blip out, we'll go back to whatever we were doing. But if things don't blip out and it degrades, you're a light to the world. That some people I feel like need a purpose to be okay. Just give me something to do. Do that. Jesus says, in the world you will have tribulation. Take heart. I have overcome the world. Oh, yeah, okay. Let me say a couple more things will be done. Uh, I, I, I wrote this thing down. Hope it's not too corny. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom. It was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief. It was the epoch of incredulity. It was the season of light. It was the season of darkness. It was the spring of hope. It was the winter of despair. We had everything before us. We had nothing before us. We were going direct to heaven. We were going direct the other way. This is it, the last bit I want to read to you. It's not from that now. A mature Christian can endure suffering. Because we have a God who shares our suffering. A mature Christian can endure grave times because they themselves have gravity. A mature Christian's heart is on the Master. A mature Christian seeks not comfort from others, but is instead a source of comfort. I was telling the band, I'm so glad I'm in a religion of the desert if we enter hard times, because it's made for it. If the God I had before Christianity, when I fell into despair or darkness, I had fallen away from God. But Christianity gave me a God where I could find that God no matter where I fall, who is himself present in our suffering.